This is Ember, a thrilling VR hack and slash game blending parkour, climbing, and environmental puzzles in a luxurious Persian palace. This releases November 21st, 2024 for the Quest 2 and Up headsets for $25 US, and for this review, we checked the game out on the Quest 3. Parkour and climbing games are becoming all too common, so let's see if Ember combination of parkour, combat, magic, and puzzles can make for an engaging game. Hey folks, Ryan for the VR Grid here. Before we get to it, if you enjoy this video, please do all the YouTube things to help us out, and if you can't get enough VR, join us every Thursday at 9 PM Eastern Time on this channel for the Virtual Boys podcast. And now, the review. So, my initial impressions of Emberstones were relatively positive. You start off on a boat approaching this big huge Persian castle, and it looks pretty good. Not great, but given what I saw from the trailers, I was kind of impressed actually. And I turned around and saw the NPC and was like, woof, but we'll get to that. Once you get to the castle, you'll walk around for a bit, scale a wall, get introduced to the various parkour elements and combat. It's fairly clear this game is heavily inspired by Prince of Persia and Assassin's Creed, with you having to search the castle grounds in search of 4 stones that are needed to defeat the big bad. Along the way you'll meet a few NPCs, fight some bosses, and battle against the peons that are always in your way. Ember has a lot of gameplay elements in here, though unfortunately none of them are really up to task. The best stuff is the parkouring and wall jumping sections, which take up a bulk of the game and mix that tactile parkouring action from games like Stride with some additional elements that help make things a bit easier, specifically slow motion. As you approach the next thing to grab, the game will go into an automatic slow motion mode, which can be disabled if you want, allowing you to easily grab the next handhold. You can wall jump, climb up and down ropes, and once you unlock the first Emberstone, you can use its wind abilities to actually grapple to faraway objects, making these sections much easier to get through. When that works, it's fun. It doesn't always work. On more than a few occasions, the slow motion mechanic didn't kick in time, and I missed grabbing a pole and plummeted to my doom. To just jump to the next pole, you just look at it, highlight it, release the grip button, and you'll automatically jump to it, but sometimes I couldn't highlight what I wanted to, forcing me to just jump and pray I could grab it on my own. Nothing game breaking, and the game is very forgiving when it comes to death, typically restarting you mere seconds from where you died, but it was a constant minor annoyance through my play, though once again, it's probably the best part of this game. Inventory is handled via a slot on each of your hips, which can store any sword in the game, with one slot available over your shoulder for weapons like a bow or warhammer. At your stomach is a portal, which acts as your storage for potions, bombs, and food. My overall impressions of the inventory system is that it's serviceable, though oftentimes janky, as I accidentally grabbed my weapons, opened my storage when I didn't mean to, or failed to store a weapon over my shoulder, having it fall to the ground. Up next is combat, and the combat in here honestly feels more like Swordsman VR than Blade of Sorcery, with NPCs typically not being that bright. It's all physics based, so if they swing at you and your swords collide, they'll bounce back, or if you have a shield, armor, that kind of sort of thing, it'll deflect blows, but it's honestly too easy to cheese the system. Even on the hardest difficulty, you can just bash at your opponents who will flail around until you break their armor, cut off their heads, and fight the next guy. This is basically every encounter went with me, and once you get more powers and abilities, encounters typically just became easier over time, save for when enemies did get more powers or kind of started throwing grenades, which was hilarious. You can watch it here, they literally will kill themselves throwing grenades. It's comedy gold, honestly. The more I played the game, the more I just got sick of the combat, and it just got in the way of getting through the campaign, as encounters are almost never that much of a challenge, unless I just wasn't paying attention. Experience and leveling up earns you action points, which can be spent upgrading your elemental powers or in your own person, be it new parkour skills, health buffs, that sort of thing. And that's fine enough too. Once again, I just think every time I upgrade, I just felt more powerful, but the enemies and level designs didn't really scale up to that, so the game just became easier and easier the more I played. You can find coins throughout the game, hidden in chests or dropped by enemies, which can be spent on weapons in your armory, which I didn't really know till late in the game. There's a hub area you unlock, which has your upgrades there, your little falcon buddy, more on him in a second, and on the far side is your inventory, which you can actually select and purchase weapons. I don't know how much it matters. Some weapons seem to have more impact, and some maybe deliver more damage, but honestly, it didn't really matter. For the most part, the combat was just so derivative that whatever I was armed with, I could more than easily handle my foes. Your magical abilities are elemental based, and either are used by doing like a force push gesture or just using a trigger button, which activates one of 2 powers for each element. And they're fine, I guess. It's janky. I oftentimes activated the wrong power. It was kind of a messy system. It honestly felt like a kind of a cheap Blade and Sorcery mod. It worked when you needed it to, but I typically avoided using it for most of the game as it just kind of got in the way visually or just made fights more awkward than they already were. Outside of the campaign are raids, which essentially offer procedurally generated maps that you can play over and over and over again. That allow you to unlock special weapons and equipment and give you experience and coin as well should you want to crew that outside of the campaign. There's also sandbox mode, which places you in an arena and lets you set up some traps, and you can basically fight as many foes as you want in as much time as you want and just kill to your heart's content. Once again, I don't find the combat in here too satisfying, so having a mode dedicated solely to this isn't really my jam. It's here if you want, but meh. You also have a little falcon buddy who talks to you, and it's cool, you can actually summon him by whistling. You just bring your controller to your mouth and hold down both trigger buttons. And once he comes, you can actually put your arm out, he'll land on it, then you can actually use falcon vision, and you view the world from his eyes, changing the scale of the game and allowing you to see additional runes scattered throughout some of the stages and puzzles. Though this is used pretty infrequently, and I actually question kind of why it's in here. I think I've had to use it twice during the first half of the game, so it seems kind of pointless, but it's kind of still cool a little bit anyways. There's also hidden collectibles you can find as well, which are added to your little hub area. Lastly would be the puzzle elements in here, many of which are pretty typical for the genre. Sliding puzzles, light puzzles, lever and trigger puzzles. It's a pretty stock affair. I'm not going to slam it. You've been there and done that before. Given the genre, it fits nicely. And like I said, this game has a lot going for it. Problem is, none of that stuff I mentioned is exceptional. It's all mediocre at best and janky at worst. And what I could forgive during my initial hour of the game just kind of got worse and worse and worse until I got sick of it. I'm currently just over halfway through the game, and I'm just tired of the game loop. There's an 8-hour campaign in here. I think I'm around the 5-hour mark, and it's just the same thing over and over and over. There's some swimming they add later on. The swimming is janky AF. Some platforming sections are just mundane, traps, lame. And while none of the game mechanics in here are outright bad, they're not good enough to maintain an 8-hour campaign. While I said my initial impressions of the visuals were kind of on the plus side, the more I played, the more that became an issue. Now the level design's on point. This huge Persian castle looks pretty damn good. For the most part, everything is static in here as far as the environment goes. Huge rooms, tiny rooms, sewers, gardens, bath areas. It has a lot going for it, even though you do kind of hang out in the same areas a bit too long. But the NPCs you face are nothing special. They repeat the same models over and over and over again. The ragdoll animations are comical at best or janky at worst. Fire and water effects are lacking. It's a larger scale game than we're used to on the Quest, but it also suffers from, honestly, underdevelopment or a lack of budget. I'm not sure which one. I will say there are options to adjust super sampling, the foveated rendering, anti-aliasing, and you can change how fast dead enemies are removed from the game as well as weapons. And on the Quest 3, running all these settings at max, I didn't have any real issues. So if you're playing on maybe the Quest 2 or something and be a little bit less powerful, you may have to adjust these a bit if you're having performance issues. For myself, jacking this thing up made it look a bit better, and I didn't really notice too much in the way of any kind of stuttering. I'm not going to say this is a bad looking game. It's not bad looking when you consider other titles we have like this, but when you do compare it to games like Assassin's Creed, and honestly even Asgard's Wrath, it kind of falls apart and does show its smaller dev team roots. As far as audio goes, the soundtrack kicks ass.
You should not be here.
It was very, I'm assuming, Persian in style. It fit the vibes of the game. It felt like I was playing Prince of Persia game. So I'll give it credit there. Sound effects are a little more dicey. They work, they're fine enough, I guess. But the most lacking part of this game by far is the voice work, which I'm pretty sure is all AI generated. And if it's not good either way. Everyone sounds unemotional. There's no weight to anyone's words.
Reality and time, and where we hide the Windstone from the Shadow Sultan.
The Windstone. Is that one of the 4 mythical Ember stones? My brother used to tell me stories about their immense power, and how they corrupted anyone that used them.
One of the 6, actually, but that is a story for another day.
The script is cheesy. Man, your bird guy sounds just like, he honestly sounds like the main hero, just with like less gravelly voice. And I wouldn't be surprised if it is the same AI voice or actor. It's comical. The script is amateurish. You can optionally rescue prisoners throughout the game, and they give their little speeches about why they were here and lost loved ones and what happened in the castle before your arrival. They're so painful to look at, let alone listen to, that it just reminds you that this is kind of amateur hour. And that's the best way to describe the acting and story in this game.
Thank you for caring about this humble servant. I was so close to falling into the darkness.
You've been stronger than most. I'm glad I got here in time.
So, the more I played Ember Souls, the less I liked it. And while the game does continue to add more gameplay elements to it, none of them really make the game any more fun and typically just add to the mess that is the physics engine involved. The parkour stuff is the best stuff in the game, and everything else kind of falls apart after that, turning this into a slog the more I played. It's a jack of all trades, master of none type experience, and if you're bored and enjoy these kind of parkour experiences, then I'd say pick this up on a sale. It's not awful, but just know this going in that it's not great, by any stretch. And honestly, after playing this, I'm just going to go back and play Assassin's Creed, which is just a much more fulfilling experience. I'm going to give Ember Souls a 5.5 out of 10. It's fine, I guess, but there's just better ways to spend your time in VR. And that's it for this one. Thank you so much for watching.